Jan Robinaka, and welcome to all of you and to Captains of Industry here today, Permanent Secretary for Trade, Cooperatives, Micro, Small and Medium Enterprises and Communications, Mr. Shaheen Ali, Permanent Secretary for Agriculture and Waterways, private sector partners, ladies and gentlemen. It is my pleasure to welcome you all to this important course-setting consultations on the Pacific Agreement on Closer Economic Relations, or what is favorably known or commonly known as PACER Plus. Before I continue with my remarks, let me briefly provide some context on PACER Plus, and I guess the PS has done that as well to some extent. I won't delve into the detail. This is a regional trade agreement that was negotiated by Australia, New Zealand, and several Pacific Island nations. Its primary goal was to address the distinct challenges faced by Pacific Island economies, providing a framework for enhanced trade and economic cooperation. Fiji, while actively participating in the negotiations for PACER Plus, ultimately decided not to sign the agreement at that time based on various considerations. Since changing government, the People's Coalition made an announcement early last year to explore the possibility of joining the agreement. Last year, the ministry was, of course, focused on the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework for Prosperity, or IPEF, and committed to looking at PACER when the time was ready, which is around about now. Hence, this week's consultations have been organized to re-evaluate our stance on PACER Plus and come up with some common positions. The insights and perspectives you share today will enable us to carefully evaluate whether joining PACER Plus aligns with our national interests and development goals. We will not join if it doesn't make sense for Fiji. Fiji's involvement in the negotiations of PACER Plus was driven by our commitment to fostering regional cooperation and ensuring that trade agreements truly serve as instruments of development. The Pacific Island economies are small and vulnerable. We face unique challenges that required a tailored economic approach to growth and development. Our reality, or the reality, is that our vulnerabilities are magnified by factors such as our geographical isolation, limited market size, and exposure to natural disasters, which we all know too intimately. Therefore, any trade agreement we enter into must account for these challenges and provide us with the means to overcome them. When PACER Plus was first proposed, it was framed as a mechanism to aid in the development of our region using trade as a mechanism to achieve sustainable growth. Australia and New Zealand had significant trade flows into the island economies, and there was a need to boost trade of the Pacific Island countries to New Zealand and Australia. This is an area, ladies and gentlemen, we need to explore very closely. By doing so, PACER Plus promised to create jobs, boost economic growth, and improve the livelihoods of our people by enhancing market access and reducing trade barriers. Since the finalization of the agreement, which marked Fiji's non-involvement in PACER Plus about 4 years ago, a lot of time has passed, and the economic landscape has changed both domestically and internationally. Careful analysis of the agreement is needed, whether in its current form it is fully aligned to our development goals, and can it sufficiently address the structural changes needed by the Fijian economy. These include diversification and expansion of our narrow export base, resilience in our supply chains, and balancing our trade deficit, including the deficit with Australia and New Zealand. I don't need to remind you all that collectively we have more than $1 billion worth of trade deficit with Australia and New Zealand, and that is significant. It could be said that the trade at the moment is unbalanced. This indicates several risks. Australia and New Zealand are one of our largest trading partners, and the question we should ask is how would PACER Plus impact Fiji's trade with Australia and New Zealand? If PACER Plus increases trade, whose trade will it increase? Will it be Fiji's exports, like vegetables, root crops, kawa, and garments? And will the subsequent trade deficit become lower and more manageable? Or will our exports of Australia and New Zealand goods and products increase, and thereby increase the trade deficit even more? With significant trade amongst us, Australia, New Zealand, and Fiji, another important question arises. What happens to the tariff revenue when we do liberalize trade with Australia and New Zealand? Will we be able to afford the foregoing of revenue in this tighter fiscal situation? The Ministry of Finance recently suggested that the loss of tariff revenue could be as high as 300 million Fijian dollars for both Australia and New Zealand combined. This figure, of course, will vary on the number of tariff items for which tariffs are removed on imports from Australia and New Zealand, as well as the future consumption patterns on these products. Ladies and gentlemen, we should remember that PACER Plus has other Pacific Island country members also. One of the selling points would be that the agreement may strengthen our trade between Pacific Island neighbors. This needs evaluation. We already, as the PS had mentioned, have the Pacific Island Country Trade Agreement, or PICTA, and the MSG Trade Agreement with our Pacific brothers and sisters from the Melanesian group. What value does PACER Plus bring to the table given these existing arrangements? As your government, it is our responsibility to ensure that any trade agreement we enter into must be fair, equitable, development-oriented, and benefit our country. We have a responsibility to protect our national interests and ensure that the benefits of any agreement are tangible for our people. Embarking on PACER Plus must be in the interests of Fiji. Given the shifts in the global trade landscape, particularly following COVID-19 pandemic and other emerging trade-related issues, it is crucial to reassess whether our initial decision to stay outside PACER Plus remains in the best interests of Fiji. Today's consultation provides an opportunity for us to engage with you, to hear your views and concerns and aspirations regarding PACER Plus. We must work together to determine whether PACER Plus, as it stands, can be a vehicle for sustainable development that it is intended to be. We are particularly interested in your understanding on how PACER Plus can contribute to our long-term development goals. How can it help diversify our economy, enhance our industrial base, create employment opportunities, and facilitate entry of our products internationally? How can PACER Plus support our efforts to build resilience against climate change and other external shocks? These are some of the questions we must answer together. Ladies and gentlemen, In closing, I wish to express my gratitude to all of you for taking the time out to participate in these vital consultations. And I was just remarking to Professor Noonan that I've discovered in this role is even when you have the best of intentions, they sometimes have to change. I was actually hoping to stay all morning with you till 1 o'clock. By 10 a.m. this morning, I had to include about 3 meetings between now and 1 p.m. So apologies for that, but I'll certainly be keen to hear all your views. Maybe we'll give an opportunity for written submissions, PS, maybe, just to ensure that we capture everybody's views as part of the consultations and ensuring that we have open and frank discussions and ensure that we reach the right outcomes. Fiji at the moment is on the cusp of some quite big things, and I say that with a lot of sincerity. I've just been to the West the last 2 days, last week, to just check on some of the potential investments that are on their way. All I can say is keep watching. There's about to be some major announcements made, and that'll put us on a course in terms of our economy again, in terms of growth and sustainable development. And again, we have signed up on the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework, which is significant given its global significance. And we now have PACER in front of us for consideration in the interest of trying to ensure that we secure our trade opportunities, we maximize them, and in doing so, deliver on some of the high-ended ambitions that certainly the People's Coalition government has designs on. So with those few words, again, thank you for coming here today. I do look forward to the results of your deliberations, and best wishes for the discussions this morning.
Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for Trade, Cooperatives, Micro and Small Medium Enterprises and Communications, Honorable Manoa Kamikamica. Permanent Secretary for Agriculture Waterways, Dr. Andrew Tukana, thank you for being here, sir. CEOs, captains of industries, our business community, thank you very much for your attendance today. Senior government representatives, ladies and gentlemen, members of the media, Bula Vinaka, very good morning to you all. Well, it's a bit of a deja vu for me. We are at this juncture again to collectively as a nation discuss and forge our position on Pacific Agreement on closer economic relations, or what you know as PACER Plus. And in this room, I see some familiar faces that have been part of the journey and some new ones as well. But I would like to welcome everyone and thank you all for taking the time out of your busy schedules to be here today, this Monday morning. It's always difficult on Mondays. I would like to also take this opportunity to thank our Deputy Prime Minister and the Minister for Trade, Cooperatives, MSMEs and Communications for leading and heading today's consultations. He will no doubt have some crucial decisions to be made, and he needs to be armed with all the best information that you can give him. The Minister, having viewed PACER Plus from a perspective of the private sector for many years, he no doubt will bring a unique perspective to these discussions. I would also like to acknowledge a dear friend of Fiji and the Pacific, Professor Chris Noonan from the University of Auckland. We are really privileged to have him. Thank you, Professor, for taking this assignment on. Professor Noonan was an integral part of the Team Fiji when we were negotiating the very important, the very crucial, the very difficult Indo-Pacific Economic Framework, which coincidentally has Australia and New Zealand, but also has US, India, Japan, Korea, and other ASEAN economies. So we already have a trade arrangement that contains Australia and New Zealand. I would also like to thank all of you, the leaders of industry and government agencies that are here, validating that the PACER Plus agreement, which involves 2 of our important trading partners and 13 Pacific Island neighbors, is not just a trade agreement with the Trade Ministry, but has impact on all of your sectors. Ladies and gentlemen, I think Chese shared some history about me, but PACER Plus has a long history. It was conceived as the original PACER agreement without the plus. It was the Pacific Agreement on Closer Economic Relations that was finalized in 2001, along with its sister agreement. Some of you might know the sister agreement. It's called the Pacific Island Country Trade Agreement, or the PICTA, which is amongst the 14 Forum Island countries. So these 2 agreements were there. PACER was a framework agreement of cooperation between FICs, the Forum Island countries, and Australia and New Zealand. It was a framework agreement. Why? Because the Pacific Island countries, or the Forum Island countries, did not want at that time for Australia and New Zealand to be in the PICTA agreement. They did not want Australia and New Zealand to be parties principal in the Pacific Island Trade Agreement. So when we are considering PACER Plus now, it has an implication. It's not an agreement just between Australia and New Zealand, and it also has 13 Forum Island countries. So the most consequential provision of the original PACER was a provision called MFN, which stipulated that if Forum Island countries entered into a trade agreement with another major partner or a developed country, then they had to negotiate an FTA, or a free trade agreement, with Australia and New Zealand. So in 2008, when Fiji and PNG initialed the Interim Economic Partnership Agreement with the EU, it was assumed by some parties that this MFN clause in PACER was triggered. Not everyone had that same opinion, because what Fiji and PNG did was not really sign or ratify. They just initialed in 2008 an IEPA with the EU. But some thought that this triggered the MFN provision. So the opinions of those that matter won in the end, and thus began the negotiations for PACER Plus from 2009 to 2017. Fiji joined these negotiations only in 2014. It was a latecomer to these negotiations because of our suspension from the forum. Even though we came late to the table, I'd like to think that once we were in the negotiations, we contributed positively. And I remember that we were able to put in a number of flexibilities in the PACER Plus agreement that might not have existed if Fiji was not part of the negotiations. Even though we came late, we made the agreement better. But after the negotiations concluded, we decided not to sign PACER Plus agreement because it was felt at that time, despite Fiji's effort, the agreement did not provide enough flexibilities, enough benefits to offset potential risks and costs. Now, it has been 7 years since the PACER Plus agreement was signed in Nuku'alofa in 2017. But maybe the questions are same. What are the benefits? What is the value for Fiji? What are the costs? What do we gain? And what do we lose? Your presence here today, thus representing diverse areas and industries, will help us navigate through these questions. And I dare say through the fog of misconceptions and misunderstandings to pinpoint and crystallize the facts. These consultations are more than just a gathering of stakeholders. We want to harness your collective expertise and insights. We want to ensure that your voices are heard as we undertake this comprehensive assessment of PACER Plus. We want this environment to be open, free from emotion, and we want this environment to shape Fiji's national position on PACER Plus agreement. So this is the primary goal of today. So ladies and gentlemen, after the tea break, let's get your voices ready and just ask questions or contribute. Because each of you brings unique perspectives and expertise that will enrich our position, our discussions. We are here to have very honest dialogue, and I encourage everyone to actively contribute and share your opinions, and also critique ideas. As we proceed with our agenda, you will have opportunity to delve into the details. And the devil is in the details, and it's the same for PACER Plus. I'm confident that by working together, we will achieve a good, well-informed position on PACER Plus, and also it will help us determine a way forward for Fiji in line with our national goals, national aspirations, as set by coalition government. So, ladies and gentlemen, just to conclude my short address, thank you once again for being here. Your willingness to participate in this important consultations on PACER Plus is very important. You know, we've been asked this question, why should we remain outside PACER Plus by our partners? So let's make the most of this time together and shape a very informed and practical national position, as I said, to advance the interest of our country and our people.